Mr. President,
Senator from Tennessee.
tomorrow the distinguished senator from Alabama, Senator Shelby, and the distinguished senator from Vermont, Senator Leahy, will lead us in the beginning of the Senate's appropriations process for the year that begins this October, 2018. This is also the best opportunity we've had in a long time to do the appropriations process properly. For the last several years, we have finished and reported our 12 bills out of the Appropriations Committee, on which about a third of the Senate sits. We've reported those bills to the Senate floor. We've usually done that with bipartisan support and often unanimously. This is no small task. For example, in our Energy and Water Subcommittee, which I chair, and which the senator from California, Senator Feinstein, is the vice chair, this year we've had 3 hearings. We've received comments from 83 members of the Senate. We've considered their comments. We considered our bill in a subcommittee markup, and then we passed the bill 30-1 in the Appropriations Committee on May 24th. We are on pace this year, thanks to the leadership of Senator Shelby and Senator Leahy, to take those same steps with all 12 appropriations bills. The Interior Subcommittee, which has not been able to get bipartisan agreement since the fiscal year 2010, was able to reach an agreement this year. So I want to thank Senator Shelby and Senator Leahy, and I thank Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer, the Democratic and Republican leaders, for creating an environment in which all of this is possible. What we're doing is we're saying to all members of the Senate, we would like for the appropriations bill to be considered by more than 1/3 of the senators. We know that we've considered your thoughts in our committee process. We've done that carefully. But to the extent senators want to, we ought to be able to consider relevant amendments that have something to do with the bill on the floor of the Senate. So the key now is whether we know how to do amendments, whether we can remember how to consider, talk about, agree to time agreements, and then vote on amendments, how we can occasionally show restraint and not offer an amendment that would blow the whole bill up, keeping in mind that our goal is to pass an appropriations bills, literally a series of appropriations bills, that will spend more than $1 trillion of the taxpayers' money in the year that begins October 18. Now, too often, Mr. President, once we've gotten on the Senate floor in this shape, we've gotten ourselves into this situation. Senators blocking other senators' amendments, which senators can do, but if senators block other senators' amendment and the tit for tat gets going back and forth, then no amendments are considered, and we're back in a situation where only the 31 senators on the Senate Appropriations Committee have a chance to vote on the final bill. This is a chance for the other 69 senators to be more involved by offering their amendments on the floor. So it's my hope that beginning tomorrow, we'll return to the practice of offering amendments that have something to do with the bills at hand, and then we will either accept them, modify them, try to talk a senator out of offering it, or agree to a short period of time to talk about a bill and then actually vote on the amendment. If we do that, Mr. President, we can finish our work in a timely way, and we can restore to the Senate its most basic process, which is its Article 1 of the Constitution responsibility for appropriating dollars. Tonight, I will make my opening remarks on one of the 3 bills that we'll be considering this week, the Energy and Water Development Appropriations Bill. Tomorrow, Senators Shelby, Senator Leahy will officially kick off our appropriations process. Senator Feinstein, my colleague on the Energy and Water Appropriations Subcommittee, with whom I've worked for several years, will make her remarks. So will other senators for the other 2 subcommittees. And then we will begin to vote on amendments. Our plan is to begin voting on amendments tomorrow. We have a number of amendments already proposed that are bipartisan. Of course, it's up to the Republican leader and the Democratic leader how we proceed. But I've talked with them, I've talked with other colleagues. Our hope is to have a couple of amendments to vote on just before lunch, 2 more amendments to vote on right after lunch, other amendments to vote on tomorrow afternoon. I would say to senators and to staff that all of us, all 6 of us senators involved in the 3 subcommittees, plus Senator Shelby and Senator Leahy, hope that senators will file their amendments tonight and tomorrow. We want to finish the bill this week. That's what Senator McConnell has asked us to do. That means in order to have timely consideration of amendments, and we can do a number of them during the week, those that aren't accepted we can vote on, we need to get on with it. We can still consider several amendments tomorrow other than the ones that are already planned. And this information has been available to senators and staff for them to consider. The Energy and Water Appropriations Bill went through that entire process that I just mentioned. That's been public, and it's been available for anybody to read since May 24th. It was approved by 30-1 by a third of the Senate. And as I said, 83 senators made suggestions that we tried to accommodate in the bill. The Military Construction Veterans Affairs Bill has been available to the full Senate since June the 7th. It was approved unanimously after going through the full appropriations process by a vote of 31-0. The legislative branch appropriations bill is the 3rd subcommittee bill that will be considered this week. It's been available since June 14. It went through the entire process and was approved 31-0. On last Saturday, all 3 of these bills were all stitched together into one bill. That's been available, and we call it in our colloquy, or in our way of talking, a minibus. 3 subcommittee appropriations bills, fully vetted, fully public. It's time to deal with them. Before I describe the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill in detail, I would like to tell the Senate a story that was told to me by the senator from Colorado, Senator Gardner, who's taking an active interest in research, technology, and development ever since his arrival in the United States Senate 4 years ago. Senator Gardner came by my office a few weeks ago, and this is what he said to me. He said, you know, I was flying over the Middle East, and I looked down, there were cars everywhere, and I thought, well, Henry Ford invented the assembly line. Then it got to be dark, and there were lights everywhere, and I thought, well, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. And we were flying at 30,000 feet, and I thought the Wright brothers invented the airplane. They're all Americans. And I got to thinking, that's not all. We invented the internet, the personal computer, the polio vaccine, nuclear power. It's hard to think, Mr. President, of a major technological innovation since World War II that didn't have some support from government-sponsored research. A few weeks ago, a friend of mine in Nashville came up to me and lamented the fact. He said, I'm so sorry that Congress hasn't been funding research, because he understood that since World War II it had been so important to our country. I told my friend that I think you've been missing what's actually been happening, because quietly, with bipartisan support, this Congress, which has a Republican majority, and for the last 2 appropriations bills, a Republican president, has been approving record funding for science, research, and technology. It's important that the American people know that. Since January 2015, it's true, we've had a Republican majority in Congress, but there's been a consensus with Democratic members of Congress. We've worked together to provide those record levels of funding for science, research, and technology. Let me be specific. In the current year, fiscal year 2018, for the 3rd consecutive year, we've included record funding levels in regular appropriations bills for the following activities. The Office of Science. Now, the Office of Science provides funding for our 17 national laboratories, like the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Those laboratories are America's secret weapon. No other country has anything like them. Funding for the Office of Science in the next appropriations bill, the one we're voting on this week, would increase by 16%. Or let's take supercomputing. Last Friday, Secretary Perry, the Secretary of Energy, traveled to Oak Ridge, where he announced that the United States will regain the #1 position in the world in supercomputing, which we compete for every year with China and Japan. This is the result, Mr. President, not of 1 year of funding, but of 10 years of bipartisan effort through 3 different administrations, Democratic and Republican, to try to make sure that America is first in supercomputing in the world. We continue to do that in the appropriations bill that we're considering this week. Or take an agency we call ARPA-E. ARPA-E is a cousin of DARPA. Those are shorthand for an agency that was created in the Department of Defense some time ago, out of which came a variety of wondrous technological inventions, from stealth to the internet, for example. So 10 years ago, Congress decided, why not try the same thing in energy, and created what we call ARPA-E, to invest in high-impact energy technologies and then quickly get those technologies out into the private sector. That's just our committee. In other committees, the Commerce, Justice, Science Committee, chaired by Senator Moran and Senator Shaheen, the fiscal year 2018 bill increased funding for the National Science Foundation by $200 million. Next year, it will go up another $300 million. The National Science Foundation makes about 11,000 grants to universities and other institutions around the country, $8 billion this year, as a part of our effort to stay first in research, science, and technology. And then one more example. In the fiscal year 2018, for the 3rd straight year, the Labor, Health, and Human Services Subcommittee, chaired by Senator Blunt and Senator Murray, have provided record funding for the National Institutes of Health and Biomedical Research. $2 billion new dollars in the first year, $2 billion the second year, $2 billion the third year. And in addition to that, money from the 21st Century Cures Act to focus on precision medicine and on the cancer moonshot, among other things. Senator Blunt has said that's a 23% increase over 3 years. So I would say to my friend in Nashville, and to others who may not have noticed this quiet development, that this Republican Congress and the Democratic members of Congress as well understand that a principal reason why this country produces 24% of all the money in the world for just 5% of the people, the principal reason for this extraordinary concentration of brain power in the United States has been support by federal dollars through our national laboratories, the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, and other agencies. Now let me make one other statement right up front. That funding is not the cause of the federal deficit. Funding for national laboratories, national defense, national park, the National Institutes of Health are all part of the 30% of the federal budget that we call discretionary spending. That's what we're talking about this week. That's the money the Congress appropriates every year, more than $1 trillion. Over the last 10 years, this part of the federal budget, the 30% that's the discretionary funding, has gone up at a little bit less than the rate of inflation, according to the Congressional Budget Office. And the Congressional Budget Office projects that over the next 10 years, this part of the budget will rise at a little bit more than the rate of inflation. So, Mr. President, record funding for the National Institutes of Health or the National Science Foundation or ARPA-E, or to keep our position in supercomputing, or for that matter, national defense, is not the source of the federal deficit. What has happened is that the Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike, have placed a priority on science, technology, and research, and within the budget limits that are established, we've given that excellent funding, record funding. The source of the federal budget deficit is mandatory spending, which amounts to more than 63% of the budget. Now to the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. This legislation provides a total of $43.8 billion, $566 million above what Congress provided last fiscal year, the year we're in now, and $7.24 billion above the President's budget request. Funding in this bill supports several agencies, including the U.S. Department of Energy, the Corps of Engineers, the National Nuclear Security Administration, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Bureau of Reclamation, and the regional commissions, including the Appalachian Regional Commission and the Delta Regional Authority. I'm pleased, as I said, that the bill provides the fourth year of record funding for our 17 national laboratories and increases funding for supercomputers so that we can stay first in the world. The U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Science, which supports basic science and energy research and is the nation's largest supporter of research in the physical sciences, is funded at $6.65 billion, a new record funding level. The Advanced Research Projects Agency, we call that ARPA-E, is funded at $375 million, record funding in a regular appropriations bill. As I said, it was created in 2007 by the American Competes Act, a bipartisan effort to invest in high-impact energy technologies. The bill provides a total of $1.68 billion for high-performance computing, including $980 billion within the Office of Science and $703 million within the National Nuclear Security Administration. This amount includes $677 million to deliver at least one exascale machine in 2021. That's the machine, that's the supercomputer that will reassert U.S. leadership in this critical area. That's the one Secretary Perry announced last week. The bill also advances efforts to clean up hazardous materials at Cold War-era sites. The bill provides $7.2 billion to support cleanup efforts, which is $581 million above the President's budget request. Mr. President, this bill also includes provisions regarding the United States Army Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers touches the lives of almost every American. Based upon the number of appropriations requests we received from my colleagues in the Senate, the Corps of Engineers is the federal government's most popular agency. I can remember a hearing of one of our committees shortly after a Missouri River flood a few years ago, and 18 different senators showed up at the hearing to suggest we needed more money for the Army Corps of Engineers. The Corps maintains our inland waterways. It deepens and keeps our ports open. It looks after many of our recreational waters and lands. It manages the river levels to prevent flooding. And its dams provide mission-free, renewable hydroelectric energy. The bill restores $2.142 billion that was cut from the President's budget request, bringing the Corps budget up to $6.9 billion, a new record funding level in a regular appropriations bill. For the fifth consecutive year, the bill makes full use of the Inland Waterway Trust Fund revenues for water infrastructure projects. In other words, when we take tax money from the barges that use the waterways, we spend that tax money to improve the waterways rather than put it in some account somewhere. The bill also provides funding that exceeds the Harvard Maintenance Trust Fund spending target established by the Water Resources Reform and Development Act of 2014. This is the fifth consecutive year the bill has met or exceeded the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund spending targets, which is necessary to adequately fund our nation's harbors, including Mobile Harbor in Alabama, Savannah Harbor in Georgia, and Long Beach Harbor in California, and many others across the country. Mr. President, we hear a lot of talk about infrastructure and the need to do something about it. Well, this bill does something about it. For 5 straight years, we're spending all the money we collect, and in fact, we raised the revenues a couple of years ago. All the money we collect and for the last few years at record levels, to improve our inland waterways and deepen our ports. A key pillar of our national defense is a strong nuclear deterrent. That's been in the news this last few weeks because of the President's discussions with the leader of North Korea. The bill includes a total of $14 billion for the National Nuclear Security Administration, including $1.9 billion for 6 life extension programs, which fix or replace components and weapon systems to make sure they're safe and reliable. Congress must maintain a safe and effective nuclear weapons stockpile and keep big construction projects on time and on budget. This bill achieves those goals. Nuclear power is our best source of inexpensive carbon-free baseload power. It's important for our national security and competitiveness. Nuclear power provides 20% of our nation's electricity, more than half of our carbon-free electricity. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which oversees our 99 nuclear power reactors, is also funded in this bill. We included funding to ensure the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is prepared to review applications for new reactors, particularly small modular reactors and advanced reactors, and to extend the licenses of our existing reactors if it is safe to do so. The bill also provides $47 million for research and development at the Department of Energy to support existing nuclear reactors, $30 million for the Center for Advanced Simulation of Light Water Reactors, and $20 million for the Transformational Challenge Reactor. The legislation again includes a pilot program to allow consolidated nuclear waste storage that I've worked on with Senator Feinstein for the last 6 years. This has been a special priority of the senator from California, as it is of mine. Funding is also included for the Department of Energy to take the first steps toward being able to secure nuclear waste at private facilities. So, Mr. President, tomorrow Senator Shelby and Senator Leahy will formally begin the process of the appropriations of the Senate for the year that begins October 1. As I said at the beginning, this is our opportunity to do it right, something we haven't done in a long time. We've done our work in committee, we've gotten our bills through, we've had our hearings, we've considered everybody's ideas, but that's just 31 of us. What about the other 69 senators? They might like to have more of a say when the bill reaches the floor. So what we're asking tonight is that senators and staff read the bills. We don't have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days just to sit around and read the bills. Senator McConnell would like for us to be through with this bill this week. We have 12 appropriations bills to consider. We ought to be able to do that in 2 or 3 days, because if we read the bills and decide what amendments haven't already been considered, file the amendment tonight. Tomorrow, we can ask consent for a time agreement of, say, 20 minutes and give each side 10 minutes to speak, and then we can actually vote on the amendment. And that's what we're supposed to do here. Sometimes the United States Senate has been like joining the Grand Ole Opry and not being allowed to sing. It's rare that we have an amendment. The appropriations process is a chance to do that. So, Mr. President, I hope that we'll have a chance to do that. And if I may make one other plea to my fellow senators. The Senate has enormous power. Each senator is equal. As a result, when the majority leader gets up and says, we're going to start tomorrow with a prayer and this bill, and then we're going to move to something else, he says, if you'll listen carefully, I ask unanimous consent that we open tomorrow at 9:30. And I ask unanimous consent that we move to this bill. And he gets that. He gets that because senators recognize that although any one of us could have stopped that by objecting, we demonstrate some restraint. Just because you have the freedom to do something doesn't mean you should always try to do it. We learned that in kindergarten. We're well past that level now. We're in the United States Senate. So I'm hopeful that we can begin tomorrow with our speeches from at least 8 of our senators who've been working on this bill, including our leaders. I'm hopeful that we'll have a couple of amendments to vote on before lunch, bipartisan amendments, maybe a couple of more after lunch, maybe 2 or 3 more in the late afternoon. That's up to the Democratic leader and the Republican leader to finally decide. But I think the chances are good at that. And I would ask all senators, staffs who are paying attention tonight, please read these 3 bills If you have amendments that need to be considered, that are relevant to the bill, please file them tonight or first thing in the morning. Talk with our staff. Let's see if we can accept them, modify them, if necessary, vote on them. Let's try to get that done this week and show ourselves and the world that the United States Senate is still capable of a complete appropriations process. After all, that's our most basic responsibility. I thank the President, and I see I have, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that for the purpose of Rule 16, in relation to the substitute amendment 2910, Division A of H.R. 5895, serve as the basis for defense of germaneness for Division A of the amendment. Division B of H.R. 5895 serve as the basis for defense of germaneness for Division B of the amendment, and that Division C of H.R. 5895 serve as the basis for defense of germaneness for Division C of the amendment.
Is there objection? Without objection.
I see the senator from Hawaii here. I don't know if he has any remark to make. I look forward to working with him. I see the senator from Oklahoma. I ask unanimous consent that the senator be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.